Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Bluegrass Jam Along. For those of you who've been listening to this podcast for a while, you will have spotted there's a new theme tune. And A, you might be thinking that's a nice bit of music, and B, you might be thinking, wow, Matt's got better on guitar, and you'd be right about the former and wrong about the latter, because my new theme tune was written and recorded by none other than Bryan Sutton. What a remarkable thing. I got an email from Bryan after the Drive episode I did with Critter saying, hey, do you fancy having an original theme tune for your podcast? And of course I said yes, please. And Bryan said, send me some ideas, and I sent him a tune I'd written, and he said, yeah, that's nice, I've got an idea. And he played me this idea and I loved it. And he said, well, I'll play the bass, I'll play the banjo, I'll play the mandolin, I'll play the... So he's recorded this thing with him playing pretty much everything on it. And then he said, would you like some fiddle on it as well? And I said, that'd be great, yeah. Then so I get another email with another file with some fiddle on it too, saying, oh yeah, I got Justin Moses in. So I now have a new podcast theme tune, which I love, written and recorded by Bryan Sutton and featuring Justin Moses on fiddle. Yet one more thing on the list of slightly nuts things that's happened since I started this podcast. Both of them are musicians I love. Both of them are musicians who've been on this podcast and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to. And to have them kind of kicking all of this off every time is such a treat, and I love it. It's so cool. I will, because obviously I'm going to talk over this every time because it's the theme tune. I'll put it at the end of this episode in its entirety so you can hear the whole thing because it's really cool and I love it. But that's the first bit of news. Yes, I still can't quite believe it. This is the first episode that it's on, and I don't think I'm ever going to get bored of hearing it. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Justin. I love it. And that's that. So let's move on to the other stuff. If you missed it earlier in last week, I interviewed Roger Simonoff about Lloyd Law and the F5 mandolins. He sort of oversaw, and as a fascinating, I've had some really lovely feedback about this one from people who know some of this stuff, but there's some detail in there they didn't, and some people didn't know any of it, and some people in between. It's a fascinating chat. Roger is just full of knowledge about this stuff and full of insight and passionate, and like it's become his life's work, and he is an extraordinary thing. And so I really enjoyed that. If you haven't listened to that, go and have a listen. There's all sorts of details about mandolins and acoustic instruments in there. Check that out. Coming up on Wednesday this week, I've got a really cool chat with Alistair Atkin, sort of following on the instrument making conversation really. Alistair has a company called Atkin Guitars that are based out of Kent in England, which is sort of southeast of London for those of you who don't know your British geography. He's about an hour and a half away from me, and for the past few years he's been building some beautiful sort of pre-war style acoustic guitars, and now also some electric guitars as well, and they're such good instruments. I've played a few of them and I've been absolutely blown away by them. And I've been trying to chat to him for a while with the podcast, and we finally managed to find a time to make it work. And what he is doing with his guitars is extraordinary. They're not only great instruments, but there's some really interesting stuff goes into them. And so tune in on Wednesday and have a listen to that. If you know about Atkin Guitars already, you'll be excited about that. If you don't, it's a really cool thing. Come and find out. That's it. That's the podcast news. I've got some really cool interviews coming up the next few weeks as well. So much going on. But what else to say? Nothing really. Let's crack on with the news announcements, which is the section we call Church Street News. And the first thing that is coming up on Church Street News is just to sort of chat about the IBMA awards, because they've announced the shortlists for loads of categories for the IBMA Bluegrass Music Awards, including Entertainer of the Year, which Del McCoury Band and Billy Strings, obviously no surprise they're in there, but Molly Tuttle, Sister Sadie and Po Ramblin' Boys are in there as well. Vocal Group of the Year, Authentic Unlimited, Sister Sadie, Blue Highway, Del McCoury Band, Molly Tuttle again. Instrumental Group of the Year, Billy Strings, Michael Cleveland and Flamekeeper, East Nash Grass are in there. There's some really cool stuff. There's too many things for me to list, but there's a whole bunch of instrumental awards. They've announced the shortlist for a whole load of vocal stuff, songwriting. So go and check them out. I'll put a link to the IBMA website. It's always an interesting time of year. But there's also the Distinguished Achievement Awards, which is for people that have contributed something really meaningful to the bluegrass world over the years. And this year they're going to Blooming Bluegrass Festival, Cindy Bowcom, Laurie Lewis, who you remember was on the podcast actually when I chatted about Doc Watson last year, Richard Hurst, and the guys at Artist Works, which is cool. I think they do some very good stuff there as well. And not forgetting the 3 inductees into the Bluegrass Hall of Fame this year, and they are Katie Daly, Alan Mundy, who has been on the podcast chatting about Clarence White, and Earl Scruggs, and Jerry Douglas, who's been on the podcast chatting about Earl Scruggs. 3 really cool additions there, but do go and check all of this stuff out. The awards will be given out in September at IBMA World of Bluegrass, across a couple of, there's the Momentum Awards, the Industry Awards, and then the sort of Music Awards as well. But yeah, go and have a look. It's a great opportunity to find some new stuff you might not know about, and they're just good conversation starters, all these lists. I really like this time of year. But yeah, that's it for the IBMA bit. The other couple of bits of news is Gillian Welch and David Rawlings have a new record coming out. They haven't put anything out for a while, and the news sort of just arrived a few days ago, but they've got a record called Woodland coming out. And as I know a bit more about that, I'll let you know, because it's not strictly bluegrass, but I know a load of you guys who love the acoustic and bluegrass stuff also love what Gillian and David do. They are so good, and have inspired a lot of people, and there's something very, very cool about what they do. So more news on that when it comes. And one other thing, I really wanted to just sort of mention this. I saw the news during the week that Happy Traum had passed, and I interviewed Happy couple of times for this podcast, once for the Doc Watson stuff, but once just to chat about his career and about Homespun. And it was one of the first interviews I did, one of the earlier ones. And Happy talked really eloquently about what he'd done at Homespun. And we talked about teaching people, and we talked about helping generations of people learn these instruments and learn this music. But he also said something that really stuck with me, and he said that he was very aware that as he went, they weren't just teaching, they were also documenting. And I've looked back at a lot of the videos they've put out, particularly things like the Norman Blake ones, the Bill Monroe ones, the Tony Rice ones, and they are such a document of an era of music. And particularly as, you know, those people are no longer with us for the most part. Obviously Norman's still with us, but, you know, Doc and Bill and Tony and those people, it is a remarkable sort of record of hearing those people play and talk about how they play. And you know, it's an extraordinary thing that Happy and the Homespun team did. You know, it wasn't Happy with all of them. It was a real sort of team effort. I understand that, but you know, and it's as I've done this podcast, that phrase of Happy's about documenting has sort of stayed with me, and I think I take a lot of pride in kind of building up a body of work with this podcast, and so I just wanted to acknowledge Happy and sort of celebrate the extraordinary legacy he leaves, because he's not like a star of the music in a flashy way that some people can be, but he has quietly gone about over decades and decades and decades being a part of this music and touching people's lives and encouraging people, and just and in the small interactions I've had with him, clearly a lovely, lovely guy. So he'll be missed by all those who knew him much better than I did, but he'll also be missed by the rest of us. But also his legacy lives on in all of us who've ever picked up a Homespun book or listened to a tape or watched a video or a DVD or streamed something online now, or whatever. You know, it's an extraordinary thing that Happy did, and he will be missed. I'm going to put out the interview that I did with him about Homespun again alongside this. I'm going to put out 2 episodes today. I'm going to just re-release the interview with Happy because, I think largely just for me, I want to hear his words again. I want to listen to Happy and just sit with that for a while, and I'm sure some of you would like to listen to it as well, so I'll put that out again too. But that is it for the news and announcements this week. We're going to move on to the new releases, which is the section called The Grass is New. And the first bit of news is David Grisman and the Rounder album band live at Grass Valley, which is a new recording on Acoustic Oasis of David Grisman's band, including Tony Rice and Vassar Clements, Jerry Douglas, Bill Keith, people like that. Really cool kind of live recording. They recorded David's first Rounder record together, but this is a live recording from a bit later, I think. And there's not a lot of live stuff around, as far as I'm aware from the lineup. I could be wrong about that, but that's really cool. And the other thing is a record by Bruce Molsky and Daryl Anger, which I didn't know about. I missed this, and one of the listeners to the podcast, a guy called Stephen Sutherland, just tagged me in a Facebook thing and pointed this out. So thank you, Stephen, for that. I'd missed this. And it's a record called Lockdown Breakdown. And I've put a track called Richmond in the playlist so you can go and have a listen. Really cool. They sound so great together. They both got such a wonderful kind of depth of tone and groove, and I mean you know what I mean. I don't need to tell you about how good they are, but this new record out, so I'm going to be listening to that this week. I haven't had a chance yet to really dig in, but I've listened to it a little bit. That is the David Grisman live Rounder band album, and Daryl Anger and Bruce Molsky's Lockdown Breakdown. Go and check those out. As always, all the stuff is in the Grass is Mostly New 2024 playlist, which is linked to from the show notes. You can go and find that. Loads of stuff I talk about in these episodes, loads of new bits and pieces. If you're looking for some new music and don't know where to go, it's a good place to start. And at this point, we would normally move on to Scroll on Buddy, which is something interesting I've discovered on social media and thought I'd share with you. And nothing particularly, I've been looking at various bits, nothing particularly kind of suggested itself this week, so I haven't added anything this week just for the sake of it, but I will next week. There's generally something in there. The only other thing is to sort of talk about what has been in my ears this week and what I've been listening to. And actually, it's not what I've been listening to, it's something I've been reading this week. I've gone back to Neil Rosenberg's Bluegrass: A History, which is a book that I read when I first got into bluegrass, and it's quite it's chock full of stuff, and it's a little bit academic, and I don't think I was quite ready for it at first. I read it and I absorbed stuff and I was really keen, but just 3-4 years of doing this podcast, I've learned so much more about the music, and I'm really enjoying going back and digging in and kind of just reading it again with slightly more context. It's an extraordinary book. It's a sort of must-read bluegrass book, and I'm really enjoying that. If you don't know it, go and check it out. It's a great read, and it's definitely worth your while. But that is it for this week. Do come back and check out the Atkin Guitars episode on Wednesday. Do listen to the Happy Tram interview if you haven't. I'd love for you to hear that, because it's a lovely interview with an influential and very sweet guy who's done an incredible amount for acoustic music. But that's it. I will see you next week. Have a great week, everybody, and happy picking. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.